All right. In today's episode, we are going to tackle this myth that a healthy youth ministry is a growing youth ministry. We've been told over and over that healthy things grow. If attendance is up, then God must be moving and we're doing something right. But here's a problem. You can have a record breaking attendance at youth group, but no one knows a single student's story and no one is shepherding or discipling them. The truth is that attendance is not the best scoreboard of a healthy youth ministry. So if that's the case, what is? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Michaela, welcome. How are you today?
I am so good. I'm glad that we're going to talk about this today.
Okay, great. Well, let's dive in. So, first question I have for you is why are we as a church so obsessed with having a growing youth ministry?
I mean, the first thing I feel like is obvious, right? Like it makes us feel good. It's tangible. We can see the results, and I feel like in so many things that's normal. We want to be able to see that growth, but we serve a God that works in so many invisible ways that it can be difficult for us to have a different perspective about what health can look like. Um, so I think definitely we get a little bit sidetracked because it's something that is visible. But then I also think that because we are all youth ministry leaders and we're in the scriptures, I think we get a little bit, I guess, like laser focus on that whole Acts early church and God added to their number daily. And we think, okay, that's what it's supposed to look like. If it worked for the early church, it's got to work for us. And so we start to try to make those things happen. We try to do what they did to like redo the recipe and make sure that that kind of growth happens. But with everything, when we look at the scriptures, we have to understand the context of what was happening then and why those things were happening and all of the surrounding information about it. So I think sometimes we just get a little laser focused on like, well, it happened here and it happened this way, so we can do that too. But I also think that at the end of the day, we care about students and we care about people, and we know what it's like to have a life that is changed by following Jesus. And so we're like, we want that for everybody. So, of course, we want to see growth. And of course, we want to equate that growth with healthy ministry. And that's exactly what it looks like. Because we just want people to know the love that we experience as well. So I think it can be a lot of layers involved in why we get so focused on that concept.
Yeah, you bring up some really good points. And one thing that sticks out to me is a lot of times our church culture it demands it, right? Maybe even
Yes.
there's people that are overseeing us and like it's actually like they really want to see growth and they get excited when there's growth. And I've even on the very extreme cases, I've even seen youth ministry leaders get compensated when their youth group grows, which to me is really not healthy because like it's not about numbers, it's about people. And when we obsess about numbers, then we lose track of people. So
And that type of
yeah.
thing happens probably more than we would think. And I think
Hmm.
a lot of those responses, what I call the higher ups, because I'm not at that level. I'm just a youth director, right? But a lot of the higher ups will respond by saying, yes, it's just numbers, but each of those numbers is a person. And so trying to I guess, reframe that concept of, well, we can count numbers because each number is a person, but it's so like dangerous. It's a slippery slope
It
between
is. Yeah,
obviously we
it
want
really
to
is.
know that each number is a person. That's why we're here, right? But then there's the danger of getting so focused on having the certain amount of numbers who are people that we lose sight of what ministry really is. And so it's tough. It's a tough one.
It is. It's definitely like you said, it's layered, it's complicated. There's no, there's not a straight answer for it. But the interesting thing is that I've seen a lot of unhealthy youth groups and a lot of unhealthy churches grow like crazy. I was actually on staff at a church that grew from a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand in a few years' time, mostly by new Christians. And I would actually define that as an unhealthy church at that time. So
Hmm.
just because a youth ministry or a church is growing doesn't mean that it's healthy, because I've seen a lot of unhealthy churches grow.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I wrestle with constantly. I had this Sunday in my program, I had 270 kids present, right? Which is not the normal size of a youth ministry, most would say. But the challenge for that is, are we growing? Are we healthy? How do we determine that? And like, just because we have a bunch of kids there doesn't necessarily mean we're doing a great job of ministry. So the self-awareness part is like very important for my team.
Yes, well said, well said. Okay, so then I think when it comes to a healthy youth ministry, that's a question that, I mean, if the question is how do you define a healthy youth ministry, the answer to that could be very different based on whoever you're talking to. So I'm curious, how would you
Mhm.
define what a healthy youth ministry is?
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me, um, even when thinking about healthy student ministry specifically, is the staff and volunteers and all of the adults that are participating in that ministry. If you have adults and staff and volunteers that care about students and whether or not those students um, are safe and authentic, to me, that's the biggest part of the recipe. Like, you have to have that first. And then I think the other part of that is, do you have those adults in place regardless of whether or not a student is going to choose to follow Jesus ever at any point in their life? Do you care enough about every single student that gets put into your care that however they choose to live their life, you are still there to care and love for them, for whoever walks through those doors? Because if you have that foundation, then I think it lays the groundwork for all the other stuff that is to come. But it matters.
Yeah, it definitely matters. And I think when that question is asked, I think every youth ministry leader is going to probably answer it differently. Maybe there is going to be some things that are in common. So for me, it's like every leader needs to discern from God what that is for their youth group. What does a healthy youth ministry look like for them? I know for me, it's going to be two things. Number one, similar to what you said, not only do you have the leaders in place, but each student is being shepherded. There's a team of leaders who are really walking alongside of students, and there's a deep relational connection with students to leaders, but then also students to students. So there's a sense of community. I mean, obviously,
Hmm.
like we all want that sense of community, but there needs to be a team of leaders who are super involved in students' lives, and they're discipling them and showing up, not just waiting for students to show up to youth group, but pursuing students whether or not they come to youth group. And
Hmm.
that can look like a lot of different ways, but I think most leaders kind of have a healthy understanding of what that looks like. And the youth ministry leader isn't the one that's doing all the ministry, because honestly, as the leader, sometimes you don't even have the capacity to shepherd students. But I mean, like, obviously, like, you can only shepherd a small amount of students, maybe 10,
Hmm.
12 students. And if you have more than that in your youth group, which most people do, then you need leaders to be a part of that process. And quite honestly, I know I'm kind of like rambling on here, but quite honestly, as a small group leader for me, which I've been a small group leader for the last 3.5 years with now a group of ninth grade guys, uh, it's actually really helpful to have a teammate and another leader that's there. Fortunately, I've always had that, and it's super helpful because there's going to be things that that leader brings to the table that I don't. So even in a small group, I mean, you need multiple leaders, I think, to be effective. So yeah, shepherding, I think, is a big thing. Yeah, so that's kind of what, shepherding and community are two big things for me.
I think some of the evidence of that too is when students have those adults that they're connecting with because they're so important. But when students are actually bringing other students with them, they feel that sense of safety and authenticity and care from the people that are surrounding them, from the other students in the community, that they're like, you know what, I will bring my school friend or my sports friend because everything can be so segmented. But if they feel safe enough, if they feel good enough about the environment, then they're going to bring other people along, which helps add to that community. And I think that, as long as we all have that general agreement between adults and leaders, like not everybody's theology is going to match all the time, 24/7. But if we're just generally in agreement that we're all pointing kids to Jesus, and that we'll figure out some of the other stuff later, then that's the heart of the matter. If we can all just agree on that, we're going to point kids to Jesus. We want them to experience the love of Christ, and we're not going to get into tit for tat fights about things, and we're not going to do that. At the end of the day, this is our goal. Then I do think it helps create that safe environment for students to ask questions, for students to develop how they think about Scripture and how they understand God. And so, if we are all doing that in a safe way, then it does promote growth and health in the entire ministry, because in all of our differences, we're all still working towards that same goal, which I think that helps bring that healthy element to it.
Yeah, so true, so true. So a lot of times, the church looks at growth as an indicator for a healthy youth ministry. What would you say is the number one indicator for you?
I think the ability for students to ask questions is one of the indicators. If a student can feel safe enough and cared for enough to say, I don't really know if I believe that. Or I'm really struggling with making this happen in my life, or even understanding why I should. If they can truly be themselves and wrestle as teenager, a student would, then that's an environment that shows that it is an effective ministry because they are wrestling. We're not trying to create robots. We're not trying to create this assimilation effect. We're trying to create real people who have a growing and continued understanding of who Christ is. And so when you have a space where you can ask those things, where you can be honest, where you can say, I have grown in my faith. I have been able to do that. I think those are healthy things. And I think that growth comes from those as well. And so yeah, it's hard because you want to say, well, health equals growth or growth equals health, but it's really so much more about, when you think about the understanding of what happens when plants grow, it's so much more. It's about the soil, it's about the sunlight, it's about all of these other things that are going into it. Then you see growth. And so if we can make those things happen, then we get to the point where God has the ability to bring people to us, and that being the opportunity for us.
Yeah, so true. I mean, I've said this before that our job as leaders is to create an environment where students can connect with Jesus. Because if we, just like the whole plant analogy, you take care of the soil and the sun and the water and all that. And really, that's what we do as leaders. We can't force change. All we
Mm-mm.
can do is create the opportunity for students to connect with God, which I think is hugely important. So, the other thing for me, I think, and you touched on it, is transformation. Like
Yeah.
if if we see students being transformed by the love and the grace of God, and that's happening on a regular basis, that's huge. Because first of all, we know it because we're relationally connected to students enough to know what God is doing in their lives. And then when we talk about it as a team and we see life transformation happening, that's a great indicator that you're in a healthy youth ministry.
Right, right. And sometimes that can mean that you're doing so much of that, what I guess I'd call the underground work, that you haven't seen those like tangible results that we all look for when it's like, oh, we got 5 new students in the past 3 weeks or whatever. But you're doing that really, really important work of creating those environments and creating those spaces for transformation that will then be able to see on the other side later more growth and more students and adult volunteers as well.
Yeah, so great, so true. Well, that leads the question, you know, what can we do to build that kind of culture in our youth ministry?
I mean, I'm a huge small groups person. Like that was instrumental in helping me in my faith walk when I was a student. And I think it's such a beautiful way to do ministry now, because when we're intentional about making sure that we group our students in such a way that they have multiple adults, like what you were talking about, multiple adults who have different perspectives, but who are there to care for them not just on Sundays and Wednesdays, but in the group chat throughout the week. And how was that test? And how was that game? And how was all of those things to show that church is not just a program and it's not just an event that can happen that's super fun. It's life and it's the ability to make those connections with each other. So if we have those small groups as the foundation, then it allows those spaces to take form, and then I think, like you were saying earlier, we can't disciple more than however many students. And then once you start getting more and more students and you have more and more volunteers, and you can't disciple those volunteers. And so we just kind of have to create these environments where we have more and more groups so that we don't. Let people fall through the cracks, which is something that I think is important. And that's not to say that people aren't going to leave or people aren't going to go through things in life where they say, this just isn't a time where I'm going to be at youth group or I can't serve right now. That's all true, and that's life, right? But I think about there's a verse in John when Jesus is making breakfast on the beach and the disciples are out in the water, and Jesus is calling instructions to them, and he's like, have you caught any fish? And they're like, no. And Jesus says, okay, well, put it to this side. And the nets start filling with fish, and they end up with so many fish because they were following Jesus instructions. But the verse that I appreciate is, with all of those fish the nets didn't tear. And so for me, when we create these small groups as nets, when we create people as nets, then even if someone is going to leave or if someone's struggling and they're not maybe popping into the group chat as much as they should, when we have those groups, those are the nets that we don't allow people to fall through because they haven't torn, because we followed the instructions and we've built the structure that allows us to, at the very least, to know what's going on in a person's life about why they're not showing up or whatever is going on in their lives. And so for me, that's a huge reminder that we have to have those nets and we're following Christ's example. And when we follow those instructions, the nets won't tear. And so for me, that structure is through small groups. And I know there's various ways to do ministry, but that's the way that works best for me.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm a big fan of small groups. I mean, obviously, being a small group leader for the last 3.5 years, it's been such a powerful way to get to know students because and I've mentioned this before in other episodes, just moved to San Francisco. So, like, I refer to me being a small group leader at my church, but that's like my previous church, but I'm still very well connected to them.
Yeah, yeah.
And honestly, yeah, I mean, basically for those core kids who show up to Wednesdays and Sundays, I've literally spent the last 3.5 years every Sunday in a small group setting with them, and then on Wednesday nights, and then outside of Wednesday nights and Sundays as well. So it's really been like it's such a powerful thing to do both on Sundays and Wednesdays if you can swing it, because leaders build relationships so strong. Like, for instance, the small group leader who is taking over, we've co-led as they hit their ninth grade year for the last few months. So one of the things I asked them on the way out is, hey, like, what can I do to help you be a great leader to these guys? And he asked me for like a profile on each student,
Oh, I
which I
love
thought would
that.
be like a quick task to do. But as I'm like doing it, because I'm a very thorough person, I literally, like, on some students wrote like a whole page and on at least every student, like a half a page. And it's just because I know them so well. And it's not
Yeah.
a testament because, like, oh, I'm such a great small group leader. It's really like, that's the ideal thing that you want, is all of the leaders to know all of the students on a very deep level. So
Hmm.
because that's how you're going to be able to disciple students. You're going to know what they need because you know them well, and then in some cases you're even able to take maybe a smaller group from that bigger group and maybe they want to do a discipleship group or something that they can do that helps them even go deeper in their relationship with Jesus. So yeah, I'm a big fan of small groups, definitely.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
All right, well, this has been a great conversation. Anything else that you want to say about this topic?
I think, well, obviously, you mentioned a little bit earlier that like sometimes there's these other forces that have these expectations of us, right? Like we're trying to hit these benchmarks and we have to do this because our boss says so, basically. And that can be hard, but I think it's important to approach those things with humility and with grace, but also with data and understanding trends. And if fall is a season where in your community everybody is at football games and doing those things, and you know that you get a bump in the spring, that's important to know and to be able to track so that you can communicate that to the people who have these expectations to showcase, well, this might not be the most realistic time to have that expectation just based on the ebbs and flow of community. And then there's super hard questions like, are there families at the church? Do parents want to also be there enough to bring their kids and their students? And so those are like uh, big questions that we have to ask at some of the bigger tables, which can be really tough. But I think they're important because it requires everybody on the team, not just student ministry, but everybody in the church to think about it as not just a student ministry problem and or expectation, but a whole church an opportunity to look at how we are ministering to the people in our community. And then the other thing I think about is my mom was very big on helping me understand that everything has its seasons, right? And so she would always tell me, "Oh, baby, this is just a season. You just need to be patient, or you need to work through it, or just know that it's not forever." And so I think about student ministry and growth, and I'm reminded that everything is a season. Every season is not going to be harvest season. Every season is not going to be the time where we're gleaning all of these students and transformation and relationships, because seasons are a natural thing that God created. And so there are going to be times where we need to focus on the internal aspect and planting seeds and growing. And then there are going to be seasons where it is harvest season. And that's not to say that we don't always pursue that, but it is important to recognize it and know that, okay, well, for us in my context, spring is really hard to get students to come to youth group because they are doing everything on the sun and preparing for the end of the school year. That sometimes means that church is less of a priority. In my context, I can't convince every family that you should prioritize youth group right now. It's not
I
going to
don't think
happen.
anybody can, although we want
Right.
to.
You want them to, because obviously I prioritize youth group so much. I made it my day job, right? So like I'm going to have a different understanding of how that works. But it's just not going to be every season. And so to just be realistic about those expectations and how we look at things, I think is really important.
Yeah, I mean, well said, 100%. And going back to what you said in the beginning about the book of Acts, the early church, like that was obviously the beginning season of the church, right? So we look at that as the ideal, but like that was just a season of the church. And we have to keep that in perspective. Two more questions that sort of popped up in my mind, and I'll share my experience with this, but I'm curious what it looks like in your context. So, first question is you have a larger youth group. So, do you divide up middle school and high school into two separate ministries, or do you meet together?
For us, it's a both and. For youth group on Wednesday, which is Wednesday nights for us, we do have a middle school youth group and a high school youth group, and so they meet at separate times. For my program on Sunday mornings, it's 6th through 12th grade, so everybody starts off in the same room before they break up into their various groups. So for
Okay.
us, it's both.
So then my question is, do you encourage small group leaders that are middle school leaders? Do you encourage them to move up with students as they enter high school?
Also, depends on the situation. I work on a team. Like I have a boss, and there are a couple of other employees that work for my boss along with myself. And so, me as a person, I like to change things up a little bit, only because I know that not every student is going to gel with every mentor or adult volunteer. And of course, that's why we have multiple people on a team. But if you don't gel with a person that's your small group leader, uh, every week for 4 years, that's a long time to have to deal with that
Yeah.
person.
No doubt.
And
Yeah,
so
100%.
so
Yeah. Oh, you bring up a good point. Yeah.
I change it up sometimes, just because I feel like that freshness can help. But we do encourage leaders sometimes to, go through middle school and then go through high schools, like middle school youth group or and then high school youth group. So for me, it depends. But I do work on a team that, for the most part, encourages sticking with students at least for a couple of years.
Yeah, I've seen it done a lot of different ways, and I've seen another youth group recently who, like, the 6th grade leaders are just the 6th grade leaders, and then when they move
Hmm.
up to 7th grade, like, they take another group in. So I've seen it done a lot of different ways, but I'm just coming from a church that really encourage leaders to move up with students as they, go through their programs. So, being in that's a larger church, so you're much more age specific. So,
Hmm.
for instance, they would have 4th through 6th grade as a preteen ministry called Surge, and then 7th and 8th is Elevate Junior High, led by different people, and then there's high school. So what I've seen, which I've never seen this before because I've never been in a part of a church that encourages this, is I've seen, like, there was one female leader who her girls are now in 10th grade and she's been with them since they were in 2nd grade.
Oh my
So
goodness.
they've moved up all the way through. And for me, I started in the preteen ministry as the guys were 6th grade and moved with them from there to Elevate Junior High and then now high school. So I've seen leaders that just stick with students, from 9th grade through 12th grade. But like there's at least, I'd say, maybe 10% of the leaders do that. And
Yeah.
the leaders that I do see that want to stick with students long term, obviously, like, the students are super connected to them
Oh my
and they're
goodness.
really
It's
connected. So it's
amazing.
like it is a good fit. Uh,
Yeah.
but I've just seen some incredible things happen when leaders stick with students long term like that.
Yeah, there's so much fruit that can come on the other side of that. So I have a group, like there are 4 adult leaders who have done multiple cycles of high school students. So they'll start in 9th grade and then take them through graduation and then start all over again. So they have kids over the years that they've done that entire cycle with. And then I have one adult leader who's like 7th grade. That's my jam. That's what I
Yeah,
do. And so
yeah,
that leader is my 7th grade leader.
that's
So,
cool.
like there's just so many different ways to do things. And so I try to incorporate as much as I can, just knowing that individuals are different. And so for some kids, it's going to be incredible. And for some kids, that 7th grade year with Mr. So and so, boom, made it happen. Everything's great. And then we move them on to somebody else. So it's a lot. There's a lot you can do in ministry. I just
Yeah,
hope
I
that we
mean,
all can
it's
remain
really
open to all the
yeah.
things.
It's really interesting because I'm more of a middle school guy personally. Like, I relate more naturally to middle schoolers, and high schoolers, I can and do relate to them, but I
Hmm.
actually am the most effective leader to high school students when I've known them since they were in middle school, because you can kind of take that relational equity
Yeah.
into the high school years. I wouldn't be as good of a high school small group leader if I just jumped in with, like, maybe a group of sophomores or something like that. So it is interesting, but, like, because you're so connected to them in middle school, like going into high school, it's like, oh, I can be like a high school hybrid leader, but everybody's built differently.
Hmm.
But if you have those relationships
Yes.
at a certain point, then you're going to be good.
Yep.
Okay.
I
So I
totally
have another
agree.
question, and I'm curious what your answer is. What do you do to equip and empower small group leaders?
Goodness. So many things. I mean, we have regular, like, annual trainings. We have trainings throughout the year. And those trainings can be everything from the basics of how to lead a small group to very specific mental health trainings that help them to feel more comfortable when a student brings up, oh yeah, I just switched my medication to this from this. Because a lot of times as adults, like we've come through generations where mental health was not something that was discussed. And now we've worked towards minimizing the stigma. And the younger generations are feeling the benefits of that because they're like, oh yeah, I do this and this, and I have depression or anxiety. And then some of the older adults are like, we're allowed to talk about this now. This is a thing. What do I do? What do I say? How do I make this happen? So we have very specific trainings to equip them to not freak out in those moments. Led by professionals. We try to build community amongst them because we don't want them to feel like their small group of students is their small group, but that the people who they're working alongside and partnering together in ministry are their people that they can relate to and pray with and lean on. So we do those types of community building types events. I mean, there's just so much. Give me
Yeah, no, that's great.
specifics.
You know what? Actually, that might be a good topic to tackle in an entire episode is
I love it.
volunteer
Yes.
training.
I'm
Yeah. So
so
maybe
for
we'll do
that.
that on an upcoming episode because yeah, there's a lot there for sure. And honestly, you said everything I was going to say and more. So I have nothing to add
Love it.
on
Yes.
that. So yeah, other than maybe let's just do that for another episode.
I think that'd be great. I've got tons of stuff for that. So
Okay, great. Good deal. Well, this is fun. So, I mean, I definitely am of the opinion that a youth ministry can be stagnant or maybe even shrinking depending on the season and be a very healthy youth ministry. So,
absolutely.
uh, you know, just because numbers are growing doesn't mean that it's healthy. So, thanks for this whole conversation today. Appreciate it. Any parting words before we go?
No, I just think we can't limit God one way or the other. So there we have it.
Well said. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.
See ya.